Corporate Finance Excel Practice Problem. In this presentation, we're going to work a practice problem in Excel related to the calculation of future value. We're going to do that compounding annually versus compounding semi-annually. Get ready. It's time to take your chance with Corporate Finance. Here we are in Excel. We have our information on the left-hand side. We're going to put that into the blue area into our worksheet on the right-hand side. Notice that we do have 4 tabs down below. If you're working on along with a worksheet provided to you, you might have 8 tabs. 4 with the answers to them, 4 with the practice problems. We will be working with an investment, years, and then the percent. The final tab will be, instead of having annual compounding, semi-annual compounding. So the first 3 tabs will be working with the same percent and investment, changing the years. So here's tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and then in tab 4, we're going to be then saying that we're going to want to compound semi-annually. So you're going to want to wait till you get to tab 4. That's going to be kind of like the new thing. So we're going to work this a little bit faster. I'm back to tab 1 because we have seen these in the past. We want to just get good at the multiple formats that we can calculate this. 1 with the formula, 2 with a running balance, 3 with the use of Excel, and then 4 with the use of tables. So let's run through this. We're going to say we have an investment, $15,000. It's been put into the investment today. We're going to invest for 11 years. We're going to get a 10% return compounded annually. How would we calculate that? Let's first do the Let's first do the formula, which would be the future value equals the present value times 1 plus r to the power of n. So let's put that into a table format. I'm just going to break out that into a table type of format, which will be nice and easy to see the components of this thing, starting with the present value that is going to be in the on the outer column. And then the second component will then be in the outer column, and we'll do the sub-calculations inside. Let's see what that would look like. We got the present value. It's going to be equal to the 15,000. Then we're going to do a sub-calculation for the whole other side, the whole other half of this, the 1 plus r to the power of n. So I'm going to say, all right, first we have 1, and then we have r, which is the rate, and that's going to be the 10% equals the 10%. I'm going to percentify this thing. Home tab numbers group, percentify it. I'm going to underline it. Home tab font group, underline it. And then let's sum this thing up, and let's just call it the 1 plus the rate. That's what we've got so far. Summing this up equals the sum of these two items, 1 plus the rate. Let's percentify this item. Home tab number group, percentified. And then we want the number of periods. So I'm going to say to n, which is going to be the number of periods, which in this case is 11. This is going to be one of the things that change when we do the semi-annual, but right now we got 11 because we're compounding annually and we have 11 years. So we're going to underline that. So let's underline that, and that's going to give us our second half of this formula. Second half of the formula has now been completed. So that's not what I wanted to call it, though. I wanted to call it that. So there's that. And then we're going to say this is going to be equal to the 110%, the inside, to the power of n, which is Shift 6 on the keyboard, or that little caret, to the power of n, which is 11. So there we have it. Let's percentify this. Home tab numbers group, percentify it. Let's add some decimals, make it a little bit more specific. Then let's go to the home tab numbers group or font group and underline. And this is going to give us the future value. Calculation has now been complete. It is now complete. And this is going to be equal to then the present value times what we just calculated here. Let's add a couple decimals. Home tab, number group, add in a couple decimals. Let's do some indenting here, a little cleanup. We're going to select these items because this is a sub-calculation. Go to the home tab, alignment, increase the indenting, and then I'll do it one more time here. Home tab, alignment, increase the indenting. Okay, so let's do that. So here's what we got here. So we're going to say that's going to be 42,796.75 is the future value after the 11-year time period. Let's do a running balance and see if we can do that with a running balance. I'm going to do this fairly quickly because we've seen this in a prior presentation, but it's useful calculation to do. So we're going to say period 0, period 1. Now I've got 2 items here that Excel will then see a series. So I'm going to autofill that down. I'm going to select them and autofill them down. I'm going to center them. Home tab, alignment, and center because these are the periods. And then I'm going to say we're going to start with the amount on the present value, period 0 of 15,000. Then we're going to be increasing it by 10% each year, compounding annually. So this is going to be equal to the 15,000 times the 10%. And this one is going to be then the prior balance equals the prior balance to 15,000 plus the interest. We now have a new value of the 16,500 after 1 year. After 2 years, what's going to happen? Well, we now have this equals the 16,500, the new amount times the 10%. So we're going to have interest of 1,650, and then the running balance is going to be the 16,500 plus the 1,650. If I was to copy this down, can I copy this down using the autofill? That would be nice. If I copy it down, there's going to be a problem. That shouldn't be 0. I know that shouldn't be 0. If I double click on it, why is it 0? Because it moved that 10% down, and I don't want it to do that. But it moved this one down, and that one's fine. So I got to change that 10%. I'm going to make it an absolute reference. Everything else looks okay. I'm going to double click on this one. That 10% in cell B3, that's cell B3. I'm going to go into that and push F4 on the keyboard. Put in a $sign before the B, a $sign before the 3, then enter. Then I'm going to copy it down and see if it does what we want, but I'm confident that it will. Therefore, I'm going to copy it all the way down and not even like check it by doing like one thing like I did last time. And then if I double click down here, it does do what we want. That looks right. That looks right. And this is equaling the 42 or whatever that it does over here. That looks right. Let's add some decimals, make it a little bit more specific. And add some decimals here. See if we're getting it down to the actual decimal. And so we're going to say, does that, and it does. So that looks good. So then, and then we've got the total. Let's say this is the total, not because there's not a period 12. And I'm just going to sum up the interest then for the whole time period. These are our earnings over the 11 years that we would get. 27,796. Now we could calculate it this way. Let's do it a different way. We could say, well, what if someone did it this way? Would it confuse me? If someone did it like this, we're going to say, highlight these two. I'm going to autofill these all the way down and then center this. We're going to start at the same starting point, which is good. The value then is going to be in the middle column. I'm just going to pick up the 15,000 and then I'm just going to jump right to the end value by multiplying it times 110%. Which would be, this would be equal then to the 15,000 and then times brackets 1 plus the 10%, giving us 110%, close the brackets, enter. So now we would be at the 16.5, which is what we got here. And then I can copy that down, but I would have to absolute reference once again the interest, which is this cell, B3. B3, I need to absolute reference. I don't want you to move that, so I'm going to select F4 on the keyboard and enter. Then I'm going to copy that down. I'm going to say, all right, let's copy that down to the 11 periods. And then I'm going to say, well, the interest then would be the difference. So it would be, this is where I stand after year 1 minus where I was before, period 0. We get that same kind of running balance, but just kind of in a different format here. Copying this down. There we have it, and then I can say this is the total, and I'm just going to make a cell over here, and this is going to be the sum of the interest again. So now we have the interest is at 27,796, and I can add some decimals here if we so choose. Home tab, numbers group, add a couple decimals, and there we have it, and there we have it. So we got the 42,796.75. Now let's do it with Excel. So we'll do it with Excel now. Let's do it with the calculator in the formulas here first. So I'm going to say, and this isn't year 1 on the table. So we're going to use the formula first. So I'm going to go, all right, formula. We want the future value FV. And then I'm going to say, okay, we get this nice little table. So then I'm going to say, all right, we need the rate, which is going to be 10%. And that will change once we go to the semi-annual. The number of periods is going to be 11, which will also change when we go to the semi-annual. We're not going to have anything in the payments because this is not an annuity. We do have a present value. That's the thing that's a little bit tricky with this. The present value is going to be the 15,000. And enter. So there we have it. Let's add some decimals. Home tab, adding a couple decimals. And then let's make it a positive number by flipping the sign. So I'm going to double click on it. I'm just simply going to put a negative in front of the F to basically multiply it times -1. Then we do it in Excel. Now let's do it with a table. We're going to do it with a table. We got the investment or starting point that we're going to have is once again going to be the 15,000. And then we have the amount from the table. The amount from the table which is going to be at 11 years, 10%. So tables down below, make sure you pick up the right table here. This is not an annuity. 10%, 11 years is going to be right here, 2.8531. 2.8531, 2.8531. And adding decimals, home tab numbers, add some decimals, and then I'm going to say this is the total then, which is once again the future value is going to be equal to this times that. I can add a couple decimals, adding a few decimals. Notice it's not exact because the table is rounded as we've seen in prior presentations. All right, so let's do the same thing. I'm going to do it a little bit faster. We want to get to tab 4 because that's when we really have like the change thing happening. So let's do tab 2 and say, all right, now all we did was change the year here to 19. So let's see if we can do some copy and pasting from the prior tab to enter this information. So I'm going to go back to the prior tab. Notice you could just change the year here, but I want to basically do it in a full another tab so we can basically jump back and forth between them and see the difference. So I'm going to copy this information. I'm just going to copy it, the whole thing. Copy, it's going to copy the formulas and everything. Go back to the second tab and paste it here. And there we have it. So now we've got the formula has been basically calculated for us. Let's calculate the periods again. I'll say this is going to be 0 and 1. And then select them. I'm going to autofill that all the way down to 19 periods now. So let's autofill this all the way down to the 19 periods. I'm going to center that. Let's center it. And then I'm going to say the value is going to start at the 15,000. And then the interest for year 1 is going to be the 15,000 times the 10%. I want to make that percent an absolute reference so I can then copy it down. So I'm going to select F4 or $ before the B and 3. Then we're going to end up with, after 1 year, 15,000 above plus the 1,500 or 16,500. That's our running balance for each period. I'm going to select those two, autofill them down. So we'll do the autofill, and there we have it. And so now let's add some decimals. Let's just go ahead and add a few decimals, make it a little bit more exact. I'm going to make these columns a bit wider so we can see what is happening. And we're at the 91,738. That looks good. Let's put the total here, total of the interest. So the total interest is the sum of this column. And there we have the interest. And we can add some decimals on the interest too. And there we have it. So now let's do it with Excel. Let's do it with Excel this time. And this isn't for the first year. Let's get rid of that. This time we'll use the formula in Excel. So I'm going to say this equals the future value. Double clicking the future value using this nice little tool they have here, which is going to be the rate. So I'm going to say I want to pick up the rate. And then it says you do a comma. So I'm going to say comma. And then the number of periods. NPER is the number of periods, which is 19. So I'll pick up the 19. And then it says comma. And then I don't have any payments because it's not an annuity. So you can say 0 or just enter a comma. And then we're going to go to the present value, which is 15. Enter. So there we have it. Adding some decimals. Home tab number group. Add a couple decimals. That looks good. Let's make it a positive number. Double clicking on this item, putting a negative before the F to flip the sign. And that looks good. Let's do it with a table. Do it with a table. So this is going to be the investment. Once again, we don't need this 1 year thing over here. Investment was starting at the 15,000. And then we got the amount from the table, which we're going to say is 19 years at 10%. So 10% is right here. 19 years is down here. So we're at the 6.1159. 6.1159. So we're going to say, all right, this is going to be 6.1159. Adding some decimals. Home tab number group. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we've got the future value, which is going to be the 15,000 times that number. Adding some decimals. Home tab number group. Add a couple decimals. 91,738, not quite exact because this round number is rounded to 4 digits. Let's do it again. Practice problem 3. Let's move this over to the left and we'll do the same thing. So now we have, instead of 15, 19, and 10, we have 15, 18, and 10. So that's very similar. So let's just copy this over. I'm going to take this whole thing from the prior tab, I'm just going to copy it over because it'll be in the same format. So there we have the formula calculating for us. So that's basically this formula. Let's run the periods again. So now I'm just going to say, okay, well, period 0, 1, autofill that down, put my cursor on the fill handle, drag it on down, center it, then the investment starting at 15,000, calculating the interest equal to the 15,000 times the 10%. I'm going to make that an absolute reference by selecting F4 or $ before the B and 3, enter. Then I'm going to say this equals the prior balance, the value before, plus the 1,500. Then I'm going to select those two cells and autofill all the way down. Autofill all the way down. So there we had it. We can add some decimals here, adding a couple decimals, making these columns wide enough so we can see something more than like those little $signs. And then we have the total, which is the total of the interest after 18 periods. And so there we have that. Add a couple decimals, home tab, numbers, add a couple decimals. Let's put an underline here, home tab, font group, underline. Let's do it with Excel now. With Excel, I'm going to get rid of this 1 year thing again. We're going to say with the formula again equals future value, double click, or I can just hit Shift 9 this time. I'll pick up the rate. So I'm going to say rate is the 10%, comma, because I'm on the second one, which is the number of periods. Number of periods is now 18, comma. Now this is kind of the funny thing here is because we don't have payments. We don't have payments, so I could put a 0 there as we did last time, or I could just put another comma. So I put another comma this time for like variety's sake. And then we're going to pick up the present value, 15,000. There we have it. Let's add some decimals. Home tab, numbers group, add a few decimals. Let's put a negative in front of the F to flip the sign to multiply times -1. And there we have it in that format. Let's do it with a table. So the table, we got the investment. Investment. This once again is not year 1. Doesn't mean anything. And we're going to say the 15,000. Then the table amount is, we got to pick it up. We got to get that from the table. That's going to be 10% at 18 years, or 18 years at 10%. Sounds more right. So 18 years is here. And then 10%. 10% is this column. This is why the tables are kind of hard. And then 18 years is going to be 5.5599. 5.5599, 5.5599. Let's add some decimals. Home tab, numbers group, add some decimals like that. Underline it. Let's do that. And then we can multiply that out. This equals the 15,000 times that table amount. Adding some decimals. Home tab, number group, add some decimals. And there we have that. It's a little bit different because there's rounding. It's rounded to 4 different digits on the table. But this is going to be the future value. All right, here's the moment we've been waiting for. Let's do this with the next tab, which is we're going to compound semi-annually. So let's work this through because now we got a little bit of a difference compounding semi-annually. So what is that going to do? So let's work the formula again. I'm going to copy the amounts, but not the numbers this time. So I'm going to copy the amounts, and then I'm going to go back on over. I'm going to paste those amounts. Let's paste those and say, all right, I want those. And then let's copy the formatting of the numbers so we don't have to reformat it. So I'm going to go back over and I'm just going to say, I want to copy like the format, use the format painter, but not like the numbers because those might change. Home tab, clipboard, format painter, back to practice 4. I'm just going to format paint that. So now we don't have to like reformat the numbers. Okay, so the investment, that's going to be the present value. I'm going to put that on the outer side. That's going to be the same, doesn't change. And then we're going to do the other side of it, which is 1 plus r to the power of n. The 1 doesn't change, but the rate is going to change. Now the rate, this is what's kind of funny here, because the rate, remember, is a yearly rate. Now when we think about this formula, we're thinking about it compounding semi-annually, and that means it's going to be compounded every 6 months. So what we're going to do is going to take this yearly rate and divide it by 2 to give us the monthly rate. Or not the monthly rate, the semi-annual rate. So we want the semi-annual rate. So I got to say, all right, now I got to take this 10% divided by 2. And now we have the 5% for the semi-annual rate. If I sum this up then, we're now at the 105. So I have to say the number of periods and match up the rate to the number of periods. So in other words, when we take this to the power of n now, which is the number of periods, it's no longer 9, even though we have 9 years, it's 18, because we have to compound this thing 18 times. So we're going to say now this is going to be the 9 years times 2, because we're going to compound it, twice a year. So notice that this rate, whatever that rate is, needs to match the periods that we're using for the number of periods, this being every half a year or semi-annual or every 6 months. Therefore, we have to take the normal rate, which is given in annual terms, break it down to the same as the periods that are being covered, which in this case would be 1 year divided by 2. That would give us the semi-annual or every half a year or every 6 months rate. So that's going to be the difference there, and we're going to say, all right, then let's take this. This is going to be the same. We're going to take the 105 to the power shift 6 of 18. And that's been percentified for us. And then the future value, now we're just going to multiply these together. This is going to be the 15,000 times that amount, and we get the 3699. Let's do our running balance now. Now we're talking about periods here. When I talk about periods, we're no longer talking about years. We are talking about semi-years, right? Every half a year. So meaning we're going to have 18 periods that represent every 6 months. So I'm going to say, all right, now we got 1, 0, and 1, and I'm just going to highlight them down or select them down, autofill them down, I believe is the proper term, if I'm going to be proper about things. And then I'm going to go to the Home tab, Alignment, and Center. Try to be proper when I can. I often fail. And this is going to be the 15,000, and then we will take the percent here. So we're going to pick up the percent. This is going to be equal to the 15,000 times not the 10%, but the 10% divided by 2 to bring the 10% down to the 5% so it matches the period that is being covered, 6 months. So let's do that a couple more times. We're going to say this will be equal to 15,000 plus 750. So this is where we stand at the end of 6 months, right? Not at the end of 1 year, at the end of one period, which is 6 months later. And now we're going to say, okay, well now after a year, we're going to say that we had the 15,000 times the 10% divided by 2 to make that 5%. And we're now at that. And so I'm going to say this is 15,750 plus the 788. So this is where we stand after 1 year, as opposed to if we look at the prior tab, this was at 10%. After 1 year, we're at 16,500 here. Here we're at 16,538 because we compounded semi-annually. All right, and then let's do this one more time and then copy it down. I'm going to say, all right, this is the 16,538 times the 10% and then divided by 2. I want to be able to copy this down, so I need to absolute reference that cell in B3. So I'm going to put my cursor in B3, select F4 on the keyboard, or put a $ before the B and the 3, enter. Then we'll say this is the prior balance plus the current interest. Then I can select these and autofill them down, selecting them and using the autofill to autofill them down. And there we have it. And let's add some decimals. I'm going to select this whole thing and just add some pennies. Make it more exact. Home tab, numbers, some pennies. And so there's our calculation here again. That looks good. That looks right. Let's sum this up. The interest. This is going to be the interest we have now. So there is the interest. All right, let's do this with Excel. Now with Excel, we might want to do this like actually 2 different ways. So let's do it with our formula thing over here. Let's go to the formula thing. In formulas and in the insert function all the way to the left, we want the future value. Let's use this little data input table first off because it's going to be a little bit different. We want the rate, and the rate is going to be the 10%, but once again, we need to make it a matching the periods. So this is the confusing thing. This will always confuse people until they get this, and you got to divide it by 2. So it's got to be the rate divided by 2. Then they want the number of periods, which is not the number of years because there's 9 years, but it's semi-annual. So 9 years times 2 is the number of periods. The payment, we still have no payment because this is not an annuity, but a 1. You know, we're doing just a 1 instead of an annuity. And then the present value is going to be the 15, no change there. So there we have it. Let's hit enter, and there we go. Let's go ahead and then home tab. Let's add a few decimals here, add some decimals. Let's flip the sign on it, double click it on this item, put in a negative before the F to flip the sign. Let's do it one more time. This time using the future value this way. We can say this equals the future value and then double click. And then we got our little table thing here. So we're going to say it's going to be the 10% divided by, or 10% divided by 2. That's the tricky thing. Comma, number of periods, 9 years, times 2. So now those things match because the number of periods matches the rate for that period, per period, comma, 0 because this is not an annuity, comma, and then 15,000 for the present value. There we have it again, adding some decimals for this. Home tab, numbers, add a few decimals, double click here, negative before the F, flipping the sign. There we have that. Let's do it with a table. So we can say, we're going to say this is the table. Table. That's not what I wanted to call it. This is going to be the investment. And I'm going to get rid of the year 1 here. Don't need that. That's not helpful. And this is not helpful. It's probably confusing. It's the opposite of helpful, as in unhelpful, confusing. And then table. So now if we look at this on the table, we're going to say, okay, now I got to look for 5%, not 10%, and 18 periods, not 9 periods. And then we'll get the right thing. So we're going to say 5%, not 10%, and 18 periods, which is going to be the 2.4066. 2.4066. This is going to be 2.0466. Adding some decimals, home tab, numbers, add a few decimals, underline that thing, multiply it out, 15,000 times 2.0466, I believe it was. Not exactly what we had before because it's rounded to the 4 digits, as is always the case. So the table future value. So there we have that. Now, again, you can kind of match this up now. Now that you think about this, you want to be able to say, okay, well, what does this compounding look like? And this running balance might be the way to do it as easy as possible. Because notice we have 15 here, 1,000 investment, 9 years, and 10%. So the percent is the same, but now we're compounding semi-annually. So if you compare this number to the prior tab on the running balance, you could say this is the same 15,000. It's over 18 years. But if I look at the running balance, I can line this up, and notice the 18 years is still 18 periods, which kind of matches up to what we did over here, where we had 18 periods, but they were because it was 9 years, right? So that means that the interest was different. So you kind of compare these two tabs if you want. The percent is going to be the 10%. Then if I go after year 1, 1 period here, it represents 1 year. Whereas if I go over here, 1 period represents half a year. 2 periods will get us to the full year. After 1 year, then, we're at 16,537.50 versus 1 year here, 16,500, even though we have the same rate because when we look at this rate, we only compounded annually versus semi-annually. So if you compound, the more you compound, the higher, you're going to get a higher return on it. So if I go then after 2 years, which again would be 2 periods, so it would be 4 periods here, 2 years, we're at 18,232. If I go back over here, 2 periods, we're at 18,135. So that difference will of course become significant over time. So compounding really does matter. It's going to make a big difference. You want to make sure that you know what the compounding is with regards to, when you're doing these present value types of calculations. And the trick just in the calculation side of it is to make sure that this percent, you realize it's an annual percent, and then realize that when you're talking about something other than yearly compounding, you have to basically break the percent down in the formulas to match whatever the period is that you are compounding in. If we were compounding monthly, we would take the percent divided by 12 so that we can then match the number of periods. And if they give you years and then say it's semi-annually, or then you have to divide it, multiply it times 2, 18 periods that don't represent a year, they represent half a year. If they said it was, monthly, we'd have to take the 9 years times 12, and we'd have a lot of periods that would be covered, and so on.